The best person you can ask for a recommendation for a PR firm is someone in editorial, an editor, a writer. And when we get that kind of referral, it is the biggest compliment.
Sure.
Because they're saying, this person has our ear and knows how to deliver what we want.
Hello, and welcome to Architecture, Design, and Photography, and occasionally philosophy. Today we are speaking with Julie D. Taylor. She is the principal and founder of Taylor & Company. She is personally involved with her clients. She focuses on image management, strategic media plans, and media relations. A creative industry professional since 1982, Julie's career covers every aspect of communication: publicity, marketing, writing, consulting, and editing. Her close relationships with global media outlets ensure pitches are heard and stories are placed. Julie served on the national board of the American Institute of Architects as 2014 to 2016 public director. For her commitment to the design industry, she was granted honorary membership of the AIA in 2018. She previously received honorary AIA status from the Los Angeles chapter. Julie is the only public relations professional given an Allied Professions Honor Award by the AIA Council of California. That is the best reading I've ever had of anyone's about page, I do have to say. I didn't stutter once, but very excited to talk to Julie because she markets architects, which are a lot of the people who listen to this podcast. So without further ado, Julie D. Taylor. Julie D. Taylor, welcome to Architecture, Design, and Photography. How are you doing today?
I'm great. I'm happy to be here, and I love the name of this because it's all my favorite things.
Well, we're going to have to amend it because a lot of the time it goes architecture, design, photography, and a lot of philosophy. I find getting into the philosophy of what people do, why they do it, really gets at the quality, depth, and thought that an individual puts into what they're doing. And most of the time we're talking to creatives of some sort. Absolutely. And when I interact with creatives that have looked deeply into the void, if you will, I find that I'm interacting with people that have a lot of insight. So it goes there occasionally.
Yes. Happy to go there.
Now, you are a design evangelist. Can you tell me about that, why you would term it that way, and so on and so forth?
Absolutely. Well, I've always been involved in creative endeavors. I studied art history and fine arts and photography, almost got my master's in photography. And when I got into design itself, it just fascinates me. And it's design and architecture are the things that affect everyday person more than they even know. And these and the creators of this go really unsung and uncredited unless something is wrong. And so
that's true.
I kind of feel, I say my firm is, one of our missions is to make the world safe for design. So we want to upgrade that. We are very picky about who we represent because they have to have an aesthetic and a purpose and a mission that has to do with the betterment of the built environment.
So how do you discern that? How do you see that? And how do you judge that for yourself? Is there any way for you to give me an example of someone you'd consider, make it up, let's say, why you would look at someone's work and say, I don't know, this might not be a good fit because you don't seem to be in line with what we're doing?
Well, first off, we've always worked, and I'm dedicated to what I call the working architect. Mm-hmm. So those that are in the trenches are doing our everyday, buildings, are problem solving. I'm not interested in the paper architect at all.
Now, what would be the difference between those two? What would be a paper architect to you?
A paper architect is one who doesn't build, has no intention of building, and therefore creates more on the fine art,
Mhm.
becomes more of a fine art through an architectural lens.
Right.
So that's not, I like looking at the stuff, it's interesting, but that doesn't stir my passion.
So your passion stirs more in the sense where the individual that you would be marketing is involved not in just the visionary, creative, philosophical side of architecture, but also in the practical side of how is this actually going to be built and being considerate of that? Is that what you're saying?
Yes. And all the philosophy and outlook and associations and illusions that feed into their work, fabulous.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are those who build, who, if I think what they're building is not responsible or good, which is completely subjective. I was on my way to a meeting and I actually called them on the way and said, can't do this. I had never done that before, but I passed one of their projects that had replaced a beautiful old modernist building that was a Korean church, ended up being. And I know it's not their fault that the developer took that down, but what they put back up was just horrendous, just out of place. And I'm like, I can't, there's so much of that happening that I can't promote that.
Right.
As well, in doing, I've had my company, Taylor & Company, for about 26, almost 27 years. And in that time, you build a big trust with the media. And that's, that's the crux of our job. And because of that, they depend on us and they expect a certain level of quality.
So there's something interesting in there to me, that when I'm approaching work as a commercial photographer, I have an aesthetic that I would like to work within, a certain type of architecture that mostly appeals to me, and that I would like to get more of that type of work. But there's also work that not necessarily that I would design or want to live in, but that I'm still okay with photographing to the best of my capabilities to help architects, promote that. And then there'd be a third category of people who are willing to pay, what, for how I grew up, as the son of a pastor, a fairly exorbitant fee. Some people are willing to pay that, yet the designs that they've produced are not something that I necessarily feel, like you're saying, all that great about promoting. And that's I think a little bit less of a concern for me than than for you in your position, because you're, in a large sense, acting as not just services to get someone's design services out there more, but you're also saying, I'm promoting these people as having good design and trying to get them work because of that. So if you put your efforts behind someone who you do not agree with their aesthetic, then you're degrading your reputation in the eyes of editors, correct?
Absolutely. Okay. And this is a great example of that. A photographer friend of mine called me and said, I just shot a job. She's looking for PR. I gave her your name. I said, well, who was it? And he told me who it was. And I was like, I'm like, well, what do you think of her work? He goes, it's not so good. I said, thank you. I love you for thinking of me. But
if you're going to go, I'm not going to take it.
Exactly. But I said, and no offense, I said, you are a one-night stand. I am a marriage. Correct.
That's a good take on it.
Yeah.
So a a lot of the clients I work with span the complete range, I would imagine, of clients that you work with. I've got people that I work with that are absolute, almost sole proprietors that have like 1 or 2 employees that do really high-end design work, and they've chosen, no, I have one guy that's completely on his own, but he does really good design work, and by choice, he only wants to work on like one building at a time. And then it goes from that to like, hundreds of people, like a Stantec type of corporation. And it's really interesting to see how each one of those companies in that spectrum, from sole proprietor to massive corporation, how they each deal with marketing and PR. The sole proprietor, or the firm that has a few principals, and then the firm that has their own marketing team and everything involved at a commercial, corporate level. Tell me about your experience of working with from smaller firms on up to bigger firms, and any advice that you could pass on to people who are listening to this podcast that are coming from those type of firms.
Absolutely. And yes, we do. We work with sole proprietors. We work, I think our biggest firm right now is about 125 to 150 employees and growing. So there's a different approach for each one. The sole proprietor, the 2 to 20 person firm, they don't have the internal workings generally, like you said, and so we come in as their department.
Okay.
What's true for both is that the business development, getting the jobs in the office, is their primary focus, which is not at all our focus.
Okay.
So,
unpack that one for me.
Okay. So I look at marketing as the overall kind of rubric. Under marketing, you've got business development, which is getting people, getting the jobs in the door.
Mm-hmm.
You've got PR, publicity, which is, media, speaking, awards, anything that goes out to the public. And one of the purposes of that is to let people who don't know you know you. So then you can kind of convert them from the business development. And then there's communications, your website, any kind of brochure, even I believe down to your business cards and how anyone answers the phone.
Branding and so on and so forth.
Exactly.
Okay.
So we're involved in the latter two. We're not involved in the actual business development. However, the work that we do bolsters what those business development goals are.
So what do you like to have in place already existing with a client that you start to work with? Ideally,
they're organized, but not always. When I started out, it was just me, and I can't tell you how many times I'm like in an architect's office, sitting on the floor, going through, their photos, their 4x5s. How much do you miss the beauty of a 4x5? Oh my God, it's so beautiful. And so that's the organization to get the materials, because we want them to send us everything.
So you're talking about the actual, even like digital files of images, and then like a branding package that they have, like all of this kind of stuff that should be pre-existing.
Yeah, any kind of text, headshots, although sometimes we'd like them to get a different type of portrait, because we work as much as in collaboration with our clients. We also want to work really independently, because they've got their business to run.
Right.
And that's the whole point. They, I like to say they were born to create wonderful stuff, and we were born to talk about it. I just want to get back to the point about the large firms and the advantage of hiring outside. Our largest firm has a a good size, at least 4 in their marketing department.
Mm-hmm.
And we've been doing their PR for 10 or 12 years. Because, as I said, the business development, the RFPs, all that's going to take precedent over the PR and media work. Mm-hmm. So it's just usually doesn't get done. Also, having someone on the outside has a bit more credibility, because the firm isn't saying, look at us, look at us, look at us. You know, there's an intermediary,
right.
Trusted intermediary. And we're out there with the media all the time. And we're, that's how we think.
Right.
So it's definitely that kind of benefit mm-hmm. to any size firm.
So we kind of work like that for really small firms that we work for. We have existing relationships with like regional publications and a few national publications, and we will like, all right, yeah, this is a good project. Maybe it'll fit good with Dwell or this right. or the other. And sometimes that can work, but I'm simply not a PR person. I'm not talkative, and my mind's not wired for relationship building and communicating in that way.
Right.
And I can make a great picture, but I can't quite sell it as well to someone who wants those great pictures. There's a talking right. and skill and relational skill that you bring to the table. Absolutely.
And sometimes I have a little tussle with photographers because some do that routinely.
Yep.
And if they're working with us and our clients, I put a stop to that immediately.
Yep.
Or they need to tell me what they're thinking or where they're going. Mm-hmm. Because our goal, because as a photographer too, you're generally going to the art department, which is a bit different from the editorial. Although in the smaller magazines, it's all, the same. Right. Number one. And number two, it may or may not be in line with what our marketing goals are. We may be going to an outlet that demands exclusivity. But if you're off doing something else, and plus, and God love you, you're not going to go to an outlet that doesn't pay you, right? That's your
USA Today.
That's the motivation, So
yeah.
But we work really well with the pay for usage, not pay for usage is a huge deal. We know that, we understand that. Right. And I'm always on the photographer side from my personal background in studying photo. And however, we need to be able to use those photographs however we want to. And if they could get, a few shekels for it, great. If they can't, they need to let us do it anyway.
I usually have a policy with clients can say, all right, for an additional fee, we can push these out without having to touch base with you or get any release rights. We can buy editorial rights to spread across right. any publication we want. And some clients really, really want that because mm-hmm. they can just, with speed, fire it out where they want it.
Absolutely.
And others don't want to pay for that. And they are more comfortable with how it works mm-hmm. going the other way. So
yeah, I mean some photographers it's kind of built in their usage. Some you got to do a buyout. Anytime, because sometimes a client will say, "Oh, this manufacturer, they wanted to use one of our photos for their ad. Can I send it to them?" And I go, "Absolutely not. They're going to have to purchase that from the photographer."
Right.
If that manufacturer had a story, an editorial about that product and wanted to use this as an example, then that's okay because that's editorial. Right. So we're very, very protective of that. I mean, when our clients go, oh, great, we're going to do this and I'll just give it to the contractor. I'm like, no.
Now, here's an interesting situation that I'd imagine you've run into a lot. On some of the shoots that I'm involved in, you'll have architect, massive commercial level contractor, construction company, and then like an interior design firm, a lighting firm. You'll have all these different people involved. And sometimes everyone gets rights to the images. They all chip in and share cost. Cost goes up because more people are getting usage, but everyone's happy. But then maybe the interior design firm pushes the images towards a certain publication before the architect could. And then who gets to say who pushes the images where and when, and how do you bring that whole team together to share the rights and get the most publication for each entity and the best return value in that situation? How do you deal with those situations, and what's your advice to your clients in that situation?
Well, it is a case-by-case basis, for sure. And sometimes it's the client who's pushing it out. So we always, from the beginning of a project, want to be in touch with the architect's client's people to make sure, because we've got to defer to whatever the client wants.
Right.
Don't release this until XYZ, blah, blah, blah. So what we do is we want to talk with them and see what their plans are. Because if an architect assumes that they're going to be mentioned in the developer's release about a new project, then they are mistaken. It is not an assumption.
Right.
The biggest thing that just sticks in my craw that I want to change, which goes into that being a design evangelist, is, at groundbreakings and building openings, the architects are usually sitting in the audience, if they're told at all.
Right.
They should be up on the dais. They should be saying things. So unless you're like a superstar, that just doesn't happen, and it's wrong. So in terms of coordinating, I've had meetings where there's like 5 PR people, in a room with each different, thing. So we've got to take the lead from the client, because we're not going to get our clients in trouble, for sure. And then it really depends on the nature of the project and what our goals are. So we're going to work collaboratively, because if the interior designer has the ear of someone, really great. Let them take the lead.
Right.
But then we have to get in there to protect our client as well. Make sure they're in the interviews. We have a situation right now, a hotel is opening. The hotel operator, they're like, we're doing all the design coverage. Because sometimes we'll have the contractor do one thing, we'll do the design coverage, but they're like, that's part of our brand, we're doing it all. So we're like, okay. Our client's in the press release, but then we were like, okay, I think there should be a quote. Let us add some more to this. Or if there's an opening and a big press kit, we're like, let us put a one sheet in about the design. So we're constantly getting the client's name in there. And that's what I like to term that we protect our clients as much as promote them.
Mm-hmm. It's an interesting behind the scenes look at the conversations that go into and the interests that are protected from all the entities that benefit from any publication of a project going out. And to your point, to have on a groundbreaking or any event of a grand opening or whatever, to take the opportunity to add more value to your project by saying the designers of this project were incredible. We want to hear from them because what they did was amazing. That it just seems like that adds value to your whole thing as a developer, whatever that you're producing. And
one would think, but I had clients who went to Texas for the opening of a university building. The daughter of the namesake got up there and thanked everyone, including her dressmaker, except for the architect. So I used to say they're the Rodney Dangerfields of the profession. Right. But that only works now with a certain generation, such as my own and above. But yeah.
I get no respect.
Exactly.
Nice. On a side note, how's Los Angeles these days? We were there back in like December, February timeframe, and everyone was like, "Don't go there, you'll die." Now it sounds like it's totally fine, and it was fine when we were there. So. Yeah,
I mean, like LA and New York have, California and New York are kind of wide open now. So yeah. So it's, it's certainly been an odd time, as we all know, and there's different levels of comfort. And California is like, 4 different states in one. There's many, many different Californias.
Absolutely, right. Yeah, you don't really understand it living on the East Coast. You travel a few hours and you go into another state. You'd have to travel from like Florida up to almost New York, it seems, I think, to cover the same distance as you would in California. And that's such a variable from, Northern California inland compared to Southern California, compared to Ventura, Santa Barbara, all that is.
Yeah. I mean, San Francisco and LA are in the same state, just kind of by coincidence.
Right. What's your pulse on the return of the economy and publishing and the business practice and the amount of jobs going around in architecture at this point?
Well, I will say, although I don't have any wood in my office, I'm more of a modernist. I've got some steel, not steel. Things have been good. Like one of our clients grew tremendously during the pandemic. I think it really depends on what typology you specialize in. The same client during the last recession didn't really have to lay people off. They do primarily healthcare and education. So everyone gets sick and has to go to school. So those things continue. Plus, those are our clients who build their buildings, for 100 years plus.
Right.
As opposed to developer work where they want to turn it. Obviously, hospitality is very affected by whatever else is going on in the world.
So there's a couple areas I'd love to hit. Your advice, like your top 3, top 5 kind of thing. Like if you're a small firm, what should you be paying attention to for your public relations if you're trying to do it yourself, or if you're looking to join up with a PR firm beyond organization? What are the next steps that you should have in mind? And then also from a photographer's point of view, in working with PR and architects, what's your advice from your experience?
Well, the first thing for any size firm, and you're going to like this, is invest in your photography.
You heard it here. Thank you for calling in today. and with that, we'll
because it's I don't think of it as an expense. It is an investment, because at the end of the day, that's all you have.
Right.
Seriously. Unfortunately, sometimes jobs end in not a good way. So certainly that's all you have. So that's number one. And it's good to be out there to, if you have that kind of personality, going to events when that starts to happen again, talking to media as a publication, sponsoring a talk, kind of whether you're interested in it or not, go for the social hour, see who, what editor is moderating it, go up and talk to them, so that they get to know you. I think mostly it's like, don't be shy, but don't be a jerk. But you can just send your work in and you'll see what happens.
Right.
When we send it in, it's very pointed. We know the editor, we know what they like, what they're looking for, how to package it, all that kind of stuff. So it's a bit different. And there are very successful firms who do their own thing. They like to do it. It's what they want to do. Okay.
I'm writing down a couple points I want to ask you about. I'm not
Okay.
paying attention, I promise, but there's a couple good questions I want to go
All
for.
right,
So.
good. And in terms of finding an agency, the best person you can ask for a recommendation is an editorial person. And I will say that's...
Could you say that again?
Mm-hmm. The best person you can ask for a recommendation for a PR firm is someone in editorial, an editor, a writer. And when we get that kind of referral, it is the biggest compliment.
Sure.
Because they're going to say, they're saying, this person has our ear and knows how to deliver what we want. And
that's a great point.
It was funny, an editor friend of mine, he every time I saw him, he's like, did this firm call you? I keep telling them to call you because we want to publish them, but they can't get it together. I said, no, I hadn't heard from them. And then I was at some event and I saw the principal of the firm and then a friend of mine who works there. And I said, go tell your boss I'm the person this guy keeps telling him to call. And then I got a call the next week. So
there you go.
Yeah. But you also, because it is, I also say they don't call public relations for nothing. You want to make sure that you jive with the person, that there's a connection, that they are in, a similar way. But you also want someone who is also going to not challenge you, but bring their point of view to it. Because we spoke with someone recently who had a big announcement, and he's like, well, I think we should wait till the other party makes their announcement, kind of see how it goes, and then make ours. And I'm like, with all due respect, I could not disagree more. The way, in olden days when it was only print and things took 3 to 4 to 6 months, until it came out, different timeline. I said, if they send theirs out at 9, it's on the web at 10. And then if we go 2 days later, story's over, done. So, we're going to bring, just like an architect's going to bring his or her expertise to their client, we're going to bring ours,
Right.
What's
the return on time invested or ability for first publication invested between online and print these days? Because they're two very, very different animals in how they're consumed and the attention that they get and the validity of actually seeing it in social media or anything else is far less than if it's in print, like in Dwell or whatever else, right?
Right.
But still, it's there.
Yeah. It's with the advent of online, the print and online, they haven't still figured out how to deal with each other based on these two requirements. Not all of them have this requirement, but these two standards in the media that I am desperate to change. One is exclusivity, and the other is the age of project.
Oh, okay.
In this, exclusivity, that we're the only ones who can publish this, and you can't publish it for 3 months after, blah, blah, blah. Everyone wants to be first. Well, media people look at all the media. Normal people don't. They may see 2 or 3 things, so they're not going to see it everywhere.
Right.
And then with social media and websites, there are some publications that demand that you take it off your website before publication. So it just really depends on how badly you want to be in that magazine in print. Print actually isn't dead. There's still a lot of it out there. There is a lot less, for sure. And there are wonderful online sites. We try with most projects to get a great print placement first before putting it online.
Mm-hmm.
Again, so it doesn't have that, saturation. And that's not always easy. We've got to kind of clamp down on some things.
Now, do you have a feeling of like where you feel the most respected print publications are for like a commercial project or a residential project? Do you what is the feeling, your personal feeling within the media sphere? Like if you've got a great residential project, be it traditional or modern or whatever,
Right.
What has the most respect? Because I'm always getting architectural clients asking me like, where should we push this?
Right,
What do you
right,
think is
right.
a good push publication these days? And then with commercial stuff, it's really hard because it's usually more so like industry magazines typically for commercial projects. So,
but also in those industry magazines are the typology verticals. They're not sexy, but healthcare people who are hiring healthcare architects are looking at Healthcare Design magazine. Right? Your neighbor is never going to see it.
right.
But those industry verticals, we call them, are definitely good.
You're talking about that outside width of the page where you can buy the whole ad.
No.
Verticals?
By a vertical, it means the typology. It's a very narrow typology. So healthcare design.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Things like that. So
Gotcha.
Um,
I'm learning insider talk today.
Yeah. So in terms of residential, that's generally you want clients, right? So you look at the newsstand, you look at what people are reading. There are the fancy national glossies, which are harder and harder and harder to get into because there are fewer pages and fewer outlets. So the competition is huge.
Yep.
And you want to, look at the publication to make sure what you're doing makes sense. If you have a large Georgian revival mansion, don't send it to Dwell.
Right.
I mean, it's just a waste of your time.
Well, unless they gutted it and made it minimalist inside and painted the outside black.
Maybe. Yeah.
There you go. And made it small.
There you go. Made it small and
somehow.
So, we use the word appropriate a lot.
Yep.
So it's like, really, what is appropriate where? So for residents, we'll go to a client book, first, client-oriented publication first. Depending on, how the house is, there's, definitely certain of the architecture trades who will do, who do the houses and the design trades. What I love, newspaper as well. Newspaper is great. Again, home pages. I mean, I still cry every time I get my Thursday New York Times because the home section has been gone for quite a while, and
I used to shoot for them, and I loved shooting that because
breaks my heart.
Yeah, the interest between the actual people in this house and the architecture were always pretty incredible. It was really interesting. Not to say that the people of the other houses I shoot aren't interesting, but they have this qualification of it. It's not just great design or interior design, but it's also of a almost not celebrity, but of a real interest behind it as well, like deep.
Which brings up a really good point, particularly on residential. So there are so many different factors that depend on where you're going to put it.
Mm-hmm.
So will the owners allow it to be rephotographed? Because some publications want to come in and take their own pictures. Will the owners be named?
Right.
Will they be interviewed? Will they be interviewed but not named? Will they be photographed? Will they say what the budget is? All of those go into where you're going to bring it.
Right.
So particularly on a single family, you've got those, you can have any number of restrictions that way.
Now, let's see. One of the things I'd written down here was video. What's your experience with marketing architects with video now? Because I'm having a hard time, depending on the client, convincing them that it's of worth. And not being a PR person, I can't quite articulate it very well and convince some clients, while other clients have jumped in and seen the benefits. What's been your experience?
It's in the past few years, publications have asked for it more and more for their web, for the web pages. So it's a good thing to have if you can do it. There's some things like Taste Made Home. I think they come and do their own, video for that on Instagram. So it's really has to do with obviously the websites, your social media. I believe it helps with search. Of course, they keep changing all the algorithms.
Right. I've heard the same thing.
Yeah. And it engages the viewer, right? So if you're going to watch, if you have a video and the viewer's going to click on it, they could spend a good 30 seconds as opposed to the 1.5 that they, click through. Right. So it's a good thing to have. I think like anything, it's got to look really good. You want the production values to be good, and there's various ways of doing that.
Right. Yeah. In approaching video projects with architectural clients, there's always this idea that you can do a black and white editorial, very minimal production if you go high on the art side of it, and the vision of this kind of artistic video fits with the vision of your firm. But that's a really, really delicate line to go. The thing I've found we do just kind of will repeat the still compositions, but we'll add like a cinema camera that does motion, and we'll add some lighting, and we just replicate that. And then if they want to do a talking head interview or anything else with clients or designers or anything else, that's kind of like your baseline, under 3-minute video that can be very healthy. It's like the go-to at this point. We haven't seen a lot beyond that at this point yet, but
yeah.
Now when you get the type of traffic that you can now get on just simply an Instagram account, no print, no, like not Dwell's Instagram, but like there's just some Instagram accounts that's all they are, and they get a lot of traction, even in the design world. Have you interacted with those kind of outlets? What's your thought of their value, and what's it like working with them?
Well, the value of any outlet is the reach, the numbers and the quality.
Now, what do you mean by the quality of the reach?
Who are the people looking at it? Are they your customers?
Right.
In general, if your customers are, old, rich retirees, which is a lot, I just don't know how much they're Instagramming. Right. But if your clients are, young tech pioneers, go as tech as you can.
Right.
So that, really just kind of depends.
Right. I'd imagine, though, for the health of any firm to say, like, all right, our demographic of clients is, 50 and up, and they're of this income bracket, blah, blah, blah. But also, in another 10 years, we're going to have a new demographic moving in. And what is that demographic looking at now?
It's the one thing about social media is I believe everyone doesn't have to be on everything.
Right.
Because also you'll go crazy.
Yeah.
It's just too much. So you want to, again, narrow it down. I would say LinkedIn because it's businessy, but Instagram, absolutely, because that's, we're in a visual place.
Right. And what is the value of maintaining an Instagram feed for an architectural firm? Like, do you run into any architectural firms that just simply haven't pulled the trigger on that? Or do you have any? Because I remember like 5 years ago, I still had clients that were like, nah, I'm not interested in Instagram.
Yeah. Well, now it's, remember when people were like, oh, do I need a website?
Right.
You know, when you get conspicuous by your absence,
right.
You know, when it's the thing to do. Generally what the hesitation is the time and the effort. I mean, we do social media for clients if they want to. Some of them, such as the larger firm with the big marketing department, they handle their own, although we've helped them with content. And so it sometimes they'll go, okay, well, how much will that cost for you to handle? I said, okay, you have to tell me what your budget is, because it can go from, you know, spending half an hour on it to spending 10 hours on it. You know, different results, different efforts.
Right.
So it is a kind of really wide open thing. And I think it is very directed toward marketing, for sure.
Right.
And what's good is you can repurpose stuff, you know, all the time. So that's great. So it doesn't have to be necessarily the latest, greatest.
And an interesting thing I'm starting to run into, and I just worked with a client this last week that we talked about this a lot, that I just turned 45 and I'm starting to sense like, you know, well, but I'm not the youngest generation anymore in the professional sphere. Mm-hmm. And, you know, you think I would have picked up on that maybe 15 years ago, but, you know, I'm a late bloomer. Mm-hmm. So, you know, talking to this person, I think she was probably in her late 20s, I imagine. And there's a completely different, there's a generational approach now that's different, because of the people holding the purse strings, or the people that are hiring me as a photographer. Mm-hmm. If I'm being belligerent in my Gen X approach, and not being aware of how the generation that's coming up behind me as an architectural photographer, how they handle themselves, the standards, the norms, I could potentially threaten and insult people without really knowing it. Like, well, this is how we did it when I was your age, and blah, blah, blah. And that's a really interesting thing for me to interact with. But as a PR firm representing architectural firms in towards, you know, primarily publications, it seems, is there a generational difference that you have to feel out and acclimate to?
Absolutely, because you're dealing with human beings, so they each are coming from whatever their viewpoint is, right, based on their knowledge and experience. And I'm definitely coming from my viewpoint, and I thank God I have a diverse staff, and especially in terms of ages, because they bring me up. I joke sometimes I'm kind of like the last adopter, but so they whip me in shape. We've been in many meetings where the client, who's I'm quite a bit older than you, but they will be quite a bit younger than I am, and they'll mention something, and I'm very quiet, and then I'm just so thankful on the way home that my millennial is explaining to me exactly what that is. You know, that's life, right? You know.
Yep.
So, but I think also, I mean, there have been times with me, I'm not shy about stating, you know, what I believe is in the best interest of the client. I got myself into a something during an interview when one of the principals asked if I actually knew this particular photographer. And I said, yes, I know him for years. I love him. And if we were to work together, we would not be working with him. He was like, ugh. He goes, let's get this straight. If we're working together, you're working for us. We're not working for you. I said, okay. I said, my decisions are made strictly to the benefit of my clients.
Right.
He makes beautiful images, but he takes absolutely no direction. And I've had instances of, people using him, and I don't have the materials that I need to represent you.
Right.
The way we feel. I opted not to give them a proposal at all. Basically because of that attitude. I mean, I'm interviewing them as much as they're interviewing me.
Of course.
And
right.
again, you've got to have that relationship and that respect. And there was obviously no respect there. So that's not a relationship I'm going to get into.
That's really interesting, because we were discussing pretty much the exact same thing with this client that I was shooting for earlier this week, in that she had worked with another photographer, like exactly like you're saying. The direction was not received, and I'm pretty sure it was a male photographer in his 50s, early 60s maybe, and she's the marketing person for this firm, and she's saying, giving her input and direction to some degree. And she felt, I wasn't there and I don't know the verbatim, blah, blah, blah. But she felt like with this person that it was like, essentially a pat on the head and like, all right, you're just managing this thing can you go over there and I'm going to do my magic and you're going to like it. And, and she is not someone who will be taking any guff from anyone. And, she then is like, all right, you're on a blacklist. And she controls a huge amount of photography work, And then there was another client at this shoot associated with the firm. And she started telling me about this photographer that was, making her feel uncomfortable just by searching for someone to share life with in a professional atmosphere, when they maybe should have kept that outside of the professional atmosphere, we'll say, And it's a really interesting conversation and dynamic for me to look at it from the outside, of the things to be aware of and the generational switch.
Yes.
Like the amount of equal amount of sexes in the workplace now, and the amount of women that hold the positions of power that are absolute gatekeepers now, where it wasn't as common in the past. We're becoming far more egalitarian and doing the same jobs because we realize we can think ourselves into those positions. We might not always fit stereotypically in those positions, but there's always going to be outliers who will excel in those positions. And if you can excel in that position in an egalitarian society, you get the right or the ability to get there. And we're getting that. And it's really interesting now to see the different power dynamic, but also all the things that come with it that are different than they were in the past, and to watch older photographers fall out of favor because they're not being sensitive to that environment. And I wonder, in your experience, you've been doing this longer than I have even, and you must have run into these interesting situations and had to callous yourself in some way, or be smarter than the people being rude to you. I don't know. Like, what's your experience with that?
It's funny. There was an instance, it was quite a while ago, but I was interviewing with one of the largest firms in the country. And so the president said, write me a proposal, but don't charge me too much. And I was talking to my father about it, my father who's been in sales his whole life. And I told him that, and he said he would have never said that to a man. I mean, my dad picked it up, picked up on it. I didn't, because I was brought up in, to not even think there was anything I couldn't do because I was female. So, that didn't happen. I think there's, in terms of that, oh, don't worry, I have this handled. I don't know if that's sexist as much as what I have found is that some creative people dismiss people who they feel are not creative.
Sure. Yeah.
And I think that has more to do with it. And I've come up against that with architects. Oh, like I'm just a marketing hack.
Right.
No. I'm not an architect. I'm not a designer. I am a photographer and an artist. I do have an eye, but even if I didn't do that, still, I have an eye. It's trained. I know what works from, the outward point of view. So, as always, any relationship is based on respect.
Right. Now, do you go on the actual shoots that some of your architectural clients will do, and how much direction and everything do you work in, and what do you like to have as a working environment when you work with photographers?
So we want to go on walkthroughs, whenever feasibly possible, and get down a shot list, because there are things that we need that either the architect or the photographer aren't thinking of. So the architects and generally, and plus the advent of the web, want everything in the picture. I mean, I had a marketing director say, I'm not going to pay for verticals because I can't put them on the website. I said, well, then they can't put it on the cover either. Shoot me a cover. So I'll go on there, and there are photographers that I work very, very closely with, and we've got a shorthand, and I know what they're going to do, and I know how they're going to do it. So yeah, we want to be very much involved. I do have some visual aids I can show that speak to that.
Oh yeah, I'd love to see some.
Want.
Yeah.
Let me. Well, this is a different example of something, but in terms of what I said about having your photographs and having good, strong photographs, because then you get to use them. I mean, this is a small project, and we got it into 40 different places, because on the basis of the photography.
I like that last cover. That's nice. That's well framed. Yeah. That one there, yeah.
So this, we also want the one real directive I give to photographers is I want to make sure I feel like a participant most of the time and not an observer. And so you also want to have several different vantage points. So this, I'm obviously an observer because it's very pulled back, but I'm also intrigued with the romance and the reflection, of the image.
Right.
And this, I can see myself sitting there talking to someone.
Right.
And then there's the very small detail, which, the architect might go, shoes, what? But publications like that.
Yeah, you've got feelings and emotion in there, not just information of a space.
Yeah, I think this is in the way. So when we do a walkthrough, we like to have scouting shots, and then we go over them with the client, with the photographer. And so this is, part of a shot list, setup to, say what's important. Okay, so in this shot, that's good. We want the doors open and closed to show that. Concentrate on all the different transparencies. And so this is the final photograph. It's also good to have, so the doors closed, the doors open, no people. You want both ways for sure. And sometimes you have the photographer's assistant and the publicist in there, so you might have to populate in different ways.
Oh, yeah.
Also tell the photographer when, we got an awesome shot here in the Scouts. This is what we want.
Right.
Some projects are really complex, and you might have just so you may need a much tighter. All these shots are by Tom Bonner. So you might need a really, much tighter focus. And we have pages and pages and pages delineating, exactly what angle to shoot from. I think,
that is a cool project.
Is that beautiful? Yeah, this is by co-architects. It's at Cal Poly, and it's Bill Timmerman did the shot. And so, get us in the two different, lights. I think it's in an interview you did, you said, wow, magic hour. That's a giveaway, but you got to do it because it's beautiful.
It's funny. I have some clients, older clients that refuse to advertise because that used to be a thing as an architect, is that you didn't advertise, that they will try and actively avoid the dusk shot because they feel it's cheating. But then when you get it and they're like, I can't not use that.
No, it's gorgeous. I mean, it's visual. And that's something too is, I will walk through a project with a client and they're like, well, this should have been this, but it was VE'd out. And I'm like, stop, never say that again. Because you're the only one who knows that.
Right.
And you're
we can
telling
Photoshop that.
Someone that it's not good as it is, So you've got to go, well, okay, you want the photograph to define all the areas. But then sometimes you got to give in a little and just do a beautiful graphic shot and detail, because you don't know where it's going to show up. It could, definitely have, legs. And also look at everything, as publicists, we want to know everything about the project.
Right.
We were in a project meeting, and on his way out, the architect goes, oh yeah, and we used 20 different kinds of glass on that building. I'm like, whoa, what? That's a fun story point. So for this building, for the opening, the university did a beer, an ale, particularly for this. The architects designed this beautiful label for it, and that becomes part of the story because, that's also fun.
Yeah.
Another thing are the people. And, as I mentioned, you want to have them, there was a time when there was no people, and then there were ghosty shadow people. But now they want it more defined to see how the space works. So this is a fabulous photograph. This has action.
Right. Nice.
All right. And this is the one that the New York Times selected.
Of course.
And then also those details, what does this have to do with architecture? But it has everything to do with the story.
Right.
And again, that was what they used as the teaser, for the story.
Right.
Shoot me a cover, man. And I stood there with the architect. I went, that's my cover.
Right.
I want a cover.
And the architect is thinking, there's not enough design in that. There's just not.
Yeah. It's
where's my architecture?
Right. There's particularly you're doing a restoration, you want those historical before photos.
Mm-hmm.
That this is the historical archival one. That's how it looked.
Right.
So before photos are usually grainy and awful, and that's good. You don't want a good before photo.
Yeah.
But also use this as a prompt. So, in the story, project obviously wasn't done yet, but having the architect stand, in the midst of that.
Yeah, I have a friend who I started an architectural firm with. My background's in architecture. So in the same way that your background's in photography and you kind of bring these things together, my background's in architecture and I'm bringing these things together in that way. And he had done a tax credit swap in renovating a downtown building in a historic district, blah, blah, blah. But there was this point where it, exactly like you had there, where it was 4 stores because of a basement that were completely demolished and open. And I kept telling him, like, dude, we've got to get you over here. We're just going to get a little bit of light on you and you're going to be the guy in the midst of all this chaos. And you see floors above and below and it'll make a great story. It'll sell. And he was just so busy we never got around to it. And I still wish I had that image.
Definitely.
Yeah. All right. So in finding a PR firm, an architect, I'm trying to summarize the things I've learned today to pass on to the people that listen. But get your data in order. Invest. Your best return on investment is quality photography. Find a photographer that you can work well with. And if your PR person is coming in, make sure your photographer is one that can work well with others.
Yes, absolutely. Nice. And the thing about, when you're interviewing photographers and looking at their portfolios, I know a lot of photographers have reps, but I would never recommend a photographer until I met that person in person.
Right.
Because as we know, photo shoots are long, arduous, boring. Who are you going to be in that atmosphere with all day long?
Do you have a worst photographer story that you can share without shaming anybody? I love these.
Well, what happened recently on a walkthrough where we went through the project and I was suggesting some stuff, and at that point it wasn't furnished yet, but it was going to be, and it was a retail showroom, so there would be stuff. I was like, okay, we got to have some purses, we got to have some stuff, and she's like, no, this is only about the architecture. We just want all the architectural things. I'm like, okay.
The photographer was saying this. Oh. Okay.
And so we kind of went back and forth, and I definitely, I zeroed in on a certain view that was definite, which then she told me was definite. Yeah. And so they got the estimate where she was proposing a 2-day shoot, one to concentrate on the architecture and one to concentrate on the function of the space with all the product that the publicist wanted. I'm like, what?
So she was kind of building an estimate, in a way, throwing you under the bus that, it's going to cost more because you have this PR person.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That too. I hadn't thought about that. But I'm thinking, so how are you going to do it without the stuff and the furniture, which is there, and the function of the space is everything that the architecture is about?
Right.
So she's done a couple jobs for this client before. It's a fairly new client. And the other jobs were spaces with nothing in them. Right? And they were okay. I said, well, what about a shot list? I don't do a shot list. I get there and I feel it. Okay. So already I don't have the control, right, and I'm not happy about it. Right. So I gave my opinion to my client. I said, if you want to go another way, I said, she is resistant to taking any direction at all.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want my client to come away with stuff that they can't use.
Right.
It's just that's not good for their investment. And I know, and I appreciate, because photographers have it tough, because Similar to an architect, you could look at all the past work, but it might not, that one job might not hit it.
Right.
Oh, I want to acknowledge John Ellis was the photographer on the retail store and the home, and Tom Bonner did the chess part. So I just want to give the credit.
I disagree with you a little bit. I don't think being a photographer is do I want to say difficult? I don't know the right word, but I worked in a pallet factory. That was difficult.
Oh, well, I mean, in terms of
you have to be aware. Like if you're not aware, you're not going to succeed. So it's not difficult, but you will not succeed if you're not extremely aware of everything. So it's not miserable, it's not difficult, it's not hard work, but it's extremely mentally taxing, but it's far better for me than working in a pallet factory with no windows for 8 hours doing the exact same thing over and over.
Oh,
that's the thing that makes me take direction very well. But my company policy with direction is I'll say my opinion twice and then we go with what the client wants. And if they value my opinion enough to override their opinion, they make that decision, not me.
And if you can try it different, both ways, great. Do it for you, do it for you. And
right.
Yeah. But where the difficulty is if I hire a photographer and he or she botches the job, I'm probably not going to hire them again.
Oh yeah, no.
And
you get one chance.
Exactly. And I'm going to look at what their prep is. There's some photographers who he's there and has scouted, what the best view is, an hour before we show up, or, checks the farmer's almanac for, and where's the sun going to be. And so some are very, detailed that way.
Yeah.
In terms of whether we show up at the shoot, we can manage a shoot, and I've managed many shoots. These days, it's an extra charge.
Right.
Although if I'm around, if it's a weekend, if I stop by, that's fine. Actually, on the showroom shoot, particularly if we were going to go with that photographer, I told the client, I'm not going to charge you for this. I'm going to go down there because I have to make sure the styling is done.
Right.
Correctly.
What's been your experience with photographers' ability to style well?
Depends on the person.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Some need one, some we kind of do it, some, and then there are some who have a real editorial eye who can, really, do that. So it depends on the photographer. And some projects need a lot of styling, some need none, some need to be thinned out.
Right. My approach typically is I'll take as much as I can take out before the image starts to feel empty.
Yeah.
And then I start seeing what you can add back in that doesn't make it feel too much or just busy.
Yeah.
And
on a single family home, you got to be careful. Like, you want to hope the owners aren't there. So it's like, that tchotchke, that's going. And, you can't have 40 family photos,
Yeah.
So you take a picture of it, as you know, of how it is, so you can put it all back.
Right. That's where the wide angle on the new iPhone 12 comes in really, really well. You just get everything in one shot. But yeah, I had a whole shoot get canceled because our client asked the homeowner to move one chair. And that was the straw that broke the camel's back, and they just wouldn't let the architect back in. It was a really great little project. It won awards and everything, but they had to use the scouting photos.
Whoa.
So I had to sell them the rights to the photos and tell them, these are legally 100% yours. Any legal ramifications are on you. Do not attach my name to anything, because if that homeowner gets mad and wants to come at me, I don't want the liability, So it's a touchy thing.
Yeah. And now, I mean, one thing we've done on home tours, because everyone's got their phone, depending on the project, such as like if we want to really, if it's promised to a publication that wants that exclusivity and all that, we've got to post no photos. Right. Even though they're just doing it for themselves, it'll show up on some place. Yep. It's so easy now with digital to show up everywhere. Mm-hmm. And so another way we protect the images is, sometimes an editor will go, oh, send me a bunch of JPEGs to look at. We make a PDF, full beautiful pages, so that's not going to get published or put anywhere without our knowledge.
Right.
And we're very, we take the photographs, the photographer has his or her image number, IMG, whatever, and then we put them in an order, we number them, we put the client's name, we put the project name, we put the photographer name. So there's no, because again, when an art director or editor gets something that's like, there's no identification, and right. So that way we have the photographer name right in the image, file name.
Yeah, we kind of have a company policy that we don't release anything unless we've done the post-production on it. But then also sure. For all contact sheets, there need to be some kind of watermark on there that goes out, even on the PDF contact sheet, because right. We've had 2 instances where we've had to get a little legal on people who've overstepped boundaries of, respecting copyrights that you just don't want to go down that path.
Yeah.
So
yeah, which is fine. Although I don't like the online photo gallery.
Yeah, we usually like send PDFs over email. Because I need to actually lay it out physically. Let me give you an example. Like, well, I'm a very analog person, so I make like little flashcards. Oh, that's nice.
And then I can spread it out, compare the angles to the floor plan, to the site plan that's been marked up.
Yep.
So I know where, because I haven't been there, so I know how to guide the editor around the building. And go, okay, well, we need this one, but not that one, so the online gallery, I can't do that, unless I can mm-hmm. just download the low res or something.
So to round this out, like
mm-hmm.
what is hot right now in architectural publishing? Like, is there a trend right now that's picking up? Are there trends that are going out? What's your feel on the whole atmosphere mm-hmm. and what's hot?
Well, like the atmosphere of the country, diversity and inclusion is very big. If you look at publications from the past 6-7 months mm-hmm. and compare them to the 6-7 months before, you will absolutely see much more inclusion and diversity, and that extends the talent pool and acknowledges the talent pool in an even greater way.
Yeah.
And definitely the personality is still, is still very much part of it. We like to have our clients, they have their headshots, but we really love like an environmental portrait.
Okay.
At a building with a background,
Now, is that for just pushing out PR pitches? Like you like to be able to include that with it? You're saying that rather than like just on a plain white background kind of thing?
Yeah. I mean, it gives that personality. And if we're talking about their expertise or their personality, it just gives it a little bit more. It makes that a little different.
Right. Cool. Well, it's been really interesting to get a little bit more of a behind the scenes industry talk education to a degree, to see the part in this whole thing where you specialize and start to become the grease that connects these gears of industry, if you will. And to get some really good feedback as a photographer of how to position yourself to best service both those industries, in connecting them, the things that I can do better, the things that the architects listening to this might consider in their own PR and in considering hiring a PR firm. So that's something I think will be really valuable to a lot of people that are listening to this. So really appreciate you taking the time to do this and to share with us your expertise. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Again, my favorite subjects. And one final hint of looking for a PR person. There are specialists, such as our firm, and then there are generalists. And one thing about a specialist is they don't have to learn the business on your dime.
Right.
And I like to say to architects, I know how you think, but I don't think that way.
Right.
So
that's a good hook. I like that. Yeah. And if an architecture firm were approaching a PR firm that did, small banks and, other businesses, but if they specialize in architecture, that's a very niche thing, especially when it comes to shelter publications and everything else.
Yeah. Although part of our mission of making the world safe for design is getting stuff in the business press, the general press, so that it's part, design then becomes part and parcel of any creative.
The common conversation of the country more so as well. So
that's our goal.
There we go. Cool. Well, again, thank you so much. Hope you guys are enjoying the constantly sunny and lovely weather you get out there in Los Angeles all the time. Luckily, we have the same thing going on here right now. So
great.
Well, again, thank you so much. It was great talking to you.
Absolutely. My pleasure.